This Canadian country music artist has shared the stage with some great country artists, just to name a few: Garth Brooks, Brad Paisley, soon to be Tim McGraw. I'm talking to Brett Kissel of Alberta. And now you have a really neat way of releasing 4 albums. This Compass project is a really creative way of doing this. Now, the South album, we've heard it all, and there's 2 songs released off the East album, and the whole thing drops tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the East album will drop tomorrow, which is very exciting. It's a singer-songwriter album, which is a really, really important part of my creative soul, really, that is now coming out in this big way. And then later on in the year, the West album, The Needle of the Compass Points West. So it's a country and Western album, you guessed it. And then the North album will come out later in September. So the fact that we've got this staggered approach is really cool. But the singer-songwriter album that comes out obviously on Friday is something that my fans are very excited about. But I think I'm actually a little bit more excited than they are, because it's been probably a decade in the making to finally release something like this.
So the 2 songs that have been released off the East album so far, Spend a Little Time with You and Nowhere, they're both acoustic. Is the rest of the album, is it all acoustic?
Yeah, it certainly is. That's the whole approach. If you came over to my farm, or if I was over at your place and we had a campfire in the backyard, what songs would I really play? And I mean, the songs that I play on stage, or the songs that I'm going to play, for example, like in Windsor at Caesars at the Colosseum, are definitely a lot different than what I would choose to play if it was a bit more of an intimate setting. So all of these singer-songwriter songs, I want to have a life. Just me and my guitar, and telling these stories behind the songs, and really pairing a beautiful melody with a beautiful lyric. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about the approach that we took to this record. And then also now having an opportunity in the middle of our show to actually strip things back, honor this East album, and play a few of these singer-songwriter style songs.
So that you came up with 4 albums to release in 1 year, is this pandemic project kind of thing, or has this been lately?
It wasn't a pandemic project. No, it's actually been something I've been thinking about since I got my first record deal. I always thought about doing a box set. I always thought about doing something that my heroes have done, like a big recording package like Garth Brooks or George Strait or Reba or Dolly Parton would release. But I knew that there was no way you could do this at the beginning of your career. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to wait until I accumulate some great songs that I've written. And then it also really stemmed from the fact that you'll write, 50, maybe 100 songs for an album, and you only put 10 out. So what do you do with all these other great songs that maybe don't have a life? So I actually took the time to look back at some of my favorite songs that I had written over the last decade, and ones that I felt really needed to see the light of day. And then I organized those songs into, these are really traditional country sounding songs, so they should go in the West album. Or these ones are really, really stripped back and just beautiful acoustic love songs. Well, they should go on this East album. So that's kind of how I organized my very crazy brain. And I could be very disorganized at times, but I felt this was an organized approach that, at least would make sense if I tried to explain it.
And the South album, I have to say, when I was listening to it, I had that feeling of 90s country going through that one. Did you?
Right on. Thank you.
Did you get to record these? Did you get to record the East album out East and the South album in the South?
In a lot of ways, yes. There were a lot of things that I did for the South album that really had to have Nashville, pumping through my veins, as well as, throughout that entire record. Because the South album is dedicated to Music City and how much I love Nashville. My wife and I, we've made our home there for many, many years. That it was important for it to have all of the new country concepts, while also having a really great 90s honky-tonk feel, which, you can hear through a lot of these songs too. However, the East album, we needed to make sure that we were on a spot by the water. So we rented a studio that was absolutely phenomenal. It was overlooking this epic scene, and that really, I think, helped us create a much more intimate project of what we were looking at. Even my approach to the vocals and everything like that was really important, in that regard.
So are the West and the North albums, are those complete, or are those still in the editing process?
Oh, no, those are done. We're just waiting to release them. The West album, all country Western, and the North one is an all live record. So that one actually was easy to do because I've recorded every show that I've done over the last 5-6 years, maybe even 8 years.
Wow.
So it was really fun for me and my band to go back and say, all right, guys, so we opened up a bottle of whiskey and we said, all right, what were some of our favorite shows of all time? So one guy says, George Street, Festival in Newfoundland. And one guy says, it was the Calgary Stampede. And one guy says, it was when we opened for Garth. So we would go back through our archives and we would listen to certain versions of our songs. So it's a greatest hits album, songs of mine like Airwaves or Make a Life Not a Living or Drink About Me, live from different cities and different venues from across Canada over the past few years.
That's really neat. And you're going to be recording this tour that's coming up. You've got some dates lined up, mostly Canadian, but you're going to be hitting up Nashville June 11th for the CMA Music Fest.
Yeah, that's going to be really great. And hopefully we'll get a chance to return to the Grand Ole Opry again. I just played at the Opry last weekend. So it's really great to, have an opportunity to go out and perform all around the world now. We've got some dates that'll come up in the UK later on this year. And I'm just really, really proud that our schedule is filling up in such a beautiful way. And when I specifically chose to say beautiful because we're going to play some of the most beautiful festivals in some of the most beautiful provinces and beautiful places this year. So my heart is very, very full, that's for sure.
It's so awesome that you get to play at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. Like, what an accomplishment that is. And you said that you lived in Nashville with your wife, but you've moved back to Canada?
We still, have kept our home in Nashville, so we still go back and forth all the time. We're the opposite of most snowbirds. Most in Ontario, when it gets cold, they go down to Florida. And people in Alberta, when it gets cold, they go down to Palm Springs or they go down to Phoenix. Well, it's kind of funny because when it gets cold, we leave Nashville and we come back up to Alberta because I love to hunt in November. We always spend Christmas at home on the farm. And we just had an opportunity to buy the family farm from my grandparents. So because of that, I was called to come home to a degree, but it's also very important to still maintain roots in Nashville because if you really want to make it in country music, you got to be in music cities. So because of that, we've kept our home there and we still spend several months in Nashville and several months back home in Alberta.
And I hear that you have a Johnny Cash signature. What home do you keep that in? Do you keep it in Nashville or do you keep it in Canada?
Well, it was in Nashville for many, many years, but I brought it back home now to our farmhouse that we renovated. It was like a Chip and Joanna Gaines TV show, I swear to you. My wife was so in her element, just renovating this absolutely beautiful home. And I've got this great music room that is just full of a bunch of memories. And there's one spot on the wall that I felt that I should probably put the Johnny Cash autograph on. I wrote a letter to Johnny Cash. He wrote me back. And I swear it's behind bulletproof glass. Like, it's my most prized possession. I love my wife. I love my children. I love the wedding ring on my left hand. And then right after that, it goes this Johnny Cash autograph.
So when you wrote Johnny Cash, what did you say in your letter?
I don't really remember. I know I was just a little kid at the time. June Carter had passed away. This was in May of 2003. So I was about to turn 13. I think I was only 12. And I just basically wrote him a letter of condolences and letting him know how sorry I was that he lost the love of his life and how much I love his music. And 12 years old and I'm going to make my first recording and, I'm your biggest fan, like all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I can't believe it. He wrote me back.
And he was gone not long after that.
Well, to make this story a little bit more interesting is that I put that in the mail and I sent it in May because she passed away, I think like May 21st to 23rd or something. And then I put it in the mail and I did make my first album. Like, I had recorded a bunch of Johnny Cash songs, essentially on a cover album that I'd made. And I was releasing it on Friday, September 2003. And my mom woke me up that morning and she said that I've got some sad news for you. She said, Johnny Cash passed away this morning. And so I remember crying and I was so sad that he had died. And later on that day when my dad came home from work, he had a stack of mail, and inside was a big yellow envelope with shaky handwriting on it to Brett Kissel. And I opened it up, and inside was that autograph, and I received it on Friday, September 12th, the day that he died.
Wow, what a story that is. I'd have that behind bulletproof glass too.
Yeah, isn't that wild, eh?
Oh, wow. So, okay, and now let's go back here for a second. You released your first album at 12 years old.
Yes.
So it was cover tunes. So do you still have copies of that? And how many copies did you make of it?
Well, we had to make a minimum pressing of 500 copies. So we did 500 copies of it. And my parents, I remember when they all arrived in the garage, we said, there is no way that we're going to sell all these. Like, we had to buy them each, I think it cost us, $12 to make each one. So that's a lot of money.
Wow, yeah.
12 times, that's a $6,000 investment. So we did that, and then we sold those 500 cassettes at the first show. So my dad and my mom, they opened up a small business account for me, and we just kept investing and buying and essentially printing more. And then we ended up making enough money that I made a second album of recordings, and that led to the third, that led to the fourth. And it was really, really special. It kind of fueled that entrepreneurial spirit for me.
And it hasn't stopped. And at 16 years old, you were the youngest CCMA nominee in the history of the show. That
was really cool. But I've got a funny story for you, because at the awards show, my dad was sitting beside me, and he said, "Are you excited?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, am I ever? I can't believe it." And, and what if I win, Dad? And my dad, he's an old farmer. He puts his arm around me. He says, "Son, I don't think you're going to win." I said, "What? Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Look at where you're sitting." And we were sitting probably 15 rows back, and we were right in the middle. And he said, "They never put you on TV if you're sitting in the back and sitting in the middle. You're sitting on the aisle." And we were looking at another artist named Johnny Reed, who I was up against. He was nominated for Rising Star the same year I was. And he said, "Johnny Reed's going to win." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because he's sitting front row and on the aisle. So nobody's going to put me on TV spilling people's beer and popcorn to get to the stage." And sure enough, he was right. Johnny Reed won. So now every award show I go to, my dad always texts me, says, "Where are you sitting?" And I said, "I'm on the aisle and I'm in the front." He says, "Okay, you got a chance."
And you've had 22 chances. You now have 22 CCMAs.
Yeah, pretty crazy how the tables have turned since 2006 for sure.
And you have 3 JUNOs. You've accumulated platinum and gold certified albums, gold singles, and 150 million global streams. So I'd say you're doing all right.
Well, pretty lucky, that's for sure. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. I just feel very, very lucky that I've been able to get to make a living playing music. It's the best thing in the world, and I'm grateful every day.
And you're so good at it. We can't wait to see you on this tour. And you're coming to Caesars Windsor June 16th. Steven Lee Olsen's going to be opening for you.
Yeah, Steven Lee Olsen, I mean, his nickname is Slow, and he's the best. He's a really good friend. He's an outstanding songwriter, a great vocalist. I think he's one of the best male vocalists in Canada, if not the best, in terms of his ability as a singer. And he's just a great guy. So I'm just honored that we get to share the stage together and have a hell of a weekend. It's really going to be great because we play in Windsor and then Aurelia the next night. And I couldn't think of anybody better than Steven Lee Olsen.
I hope you guys have a great time and best of luck on your tour. And that album drops tomorrow. So check it out on any streaming devices you have, because it will be available in its entirety April 28th. Thank you so much for taking the time with me, Brett.
No, the pleasure's all mine. And thank you very much for making the time for me.